And welcome to Law&Crime Now, everybody. I'm Jesse Weber, and thanks for joining us. We have a big show for you. We'll start with Lori Vallow Daybell. This is the mother who's facing felony charges in connection with the discovery of her kid's remains found buried in her husband's property. Now, we have a lot of updates in this case, including the fact that Fox 10 Phoenix has obtained body cam footage showing the moment that police served a search warrant on Lori Vallow when she was out in Hawaii in late January. You recall that she and her husband, Chad, were vacationing there when her kids were missing, and everyone back in Idaho was wondering where they were. In fact, a day before the video, which you're about to see, she was ordered by the court to produce her children. Obviously, that didn't happen. Now, I want you to pay very close attention to Lori's demeanor during this police interaction. Watch.
Guys, exit the vehicle, please. Step up. We have a search warrant for you guys. Your car, your belongings. Bring your arms. Have to over that.
Now, police end up finding some items that either belong to or are associated with the children, but clearly they don't find the kids. Presumably, the kids were buried in Chad's yard at the time. And then a month later after that video, Lori Vallow was ultimately arrested. I want to bring in my panel tonight. Joining me is juvenile judge and trial attorney, Judge Ashley Willcott, as well as crime analyst and former SWAT team member, Lisa Lockwood. It's great to have you both here. Lisa, let me start with you. Her reaction, this kind of almost smirk that she's giving, she really doesn't say much to the officers, even when they put her later in the police car. What did you make of it?
Very calm, very relaxed, knowing that she is a religious zealot, probably thinking that she had God on her side in some capacity. But we're seeing that behavior over and over again. So getting this footage and watching, she really just had no qualms about it, almost like, well, okay, we're going to go through the process of this, and she is giving the perception of innocence.
Well, her demeanor, her behavior is a study in, I don't even know what you describe it or what you would call it. Because, Judge, I said we have a lot of updates in this case. Apparently, a former cellmate of Lori Vallow's came forward and said, this is what happened when I was bunked up with her, and they shared a pod together. She said that Lori had a very positive attitude about being in jail. She actually preferred jail in Idaho much more than being in Hawaii. Apparently, Lori loved the media attention on the case. Anytime the news would show up, she got really excited about it. She was very concerned about looking good for her court appearances. Lori didn't really talk that much about her kids. And one quote that I wanted to share, according to this former inmate, she said that Lori told her everything has a purpose. God has a plan for everyone. His plan will be accomplished. So if we take everything that this former cellmate says is true, Judge, what do you make of it?
Well, I guess she has her faith in God, and that's where she finds her solace. Because, Jesse, we know all the time she's been filmed, pictures have been taken before she was ever arrested. She's smiling. She looks relaxed. What's interesting is a lot of defendants look that way until they end up in jail. And then you see pictures of them, and they look so downtrodden and exhausted, and they're not sleeping. It's fascinating. She's the exact opposite, that she's described as having this, peacefulness and this good attitude and happy to be in this jail and not that jail. It's a little bizarre to those of us who analyze trials and watch defendants and how they change behaviors once they're in jail. I just don't really know what to make of it. So I think that attitude's going to continue on her throughout the rest of this case.
Well, speaking of the rest of the case, Lisa, we have a arraignment scheduled for Lori Vallow. I know she had waived her preliminary hearing, but for this upcoming arraignment in Fremont County on those conspiracy to destroy, alter, or mutilate evidence, what should we expect from Lori Vallow and her attorneys?
Obviously, they're going to try and get that information out there to try to get rid of the evidence, to say that, not get rid of the evidence, to try to allow her an opportunity to say why it was unjust in the way they went about getting it. So it's going to be interesting. We've been through the process with Chad, and now it's Lori's turn. Go ahead.
Anytime she appears in court, people want to know what she's going to do. Just looking at her, people are trying to find clues because this behavior is not normal for somebody who is charged in connection with their kids' deaths. Now, she and Chad are not charged with murder. We've talked about that a number of times on this case, on this program, and we could get into that. But I want to actually, we talk about her demeanor. Let's rewind, and you remember when Lori Vallow was married to Charles Vallow, one of her former husbands? And he said that he wanted her committed to a mental health institution, and she was brought in for police questioning. Do you remember this video and how she responded to police then? Now, I warn you again, the faces are blurred for the safety of Tylee, who was in that room at that time. But just watch Lori Vallow's demeanor here.
I just think it's funny because he's trying to tell everything. Just let him
Right.
explain.
So,
That's very smart. Because I'm really the one that did something wrong.
but no, here's the thing: is I don't know, and I'm not going to take sides.
Right, no,
but
I
just
don't know.
talking to you, I mean, I don't see you being a danger to yourself or anybody else. You got your kids to school.
Right.
I don't know, but I'm not going to play side. I'm just going to let you know that we are required, if you're here, that we will, even against with force if we have to.
Right.
If you're still here when it's approved, we'll have to take you to CBI.
Okay. And what is it called? I was just going to write it down.
Community Bridges.
Okay.
That's where we take you. Now, I don't know who he went through to get the order taken care of.
That's what I'm saying. How do you even get that? He got that in the middle of the night? How do you get something in the middle of the night?
It's family members can do it for other ones who have like drug dependency or not getting help, mental health
Yeah, but how would
issues.
he get? He had to come here. Isn't stuff closed?
It's not here. There are places you can go. So
How would you think of something?
I don't know. I don't
Okay,
know.
sorry.
So
It's this guy. It's okay. It's called Community Bridges. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
I'm just gonna write it down.
so I'm
But
going
they'll
to.
be looking for me. That's the whole thing. Like, that's what.
We don't bust down doors to get you, but we will knock. So if you see police officers knocking, talk to them through the door if you really don't want to go.
Okay.
If you want a free medical evaluation,
I was
psychological
gonna say I haven't
evaluation,
gotten any sleep in about 3 days. They have good facilities.
they do actually, from what I understand.
A gym where I could work out.
yeah,
I'm
so-
kind of happy.
Like I said, we.
You'll be okay
Off-
without your mama.
You are going to get a padded room.
How times change and things are just completely different. Okay, I said there's a lot of updates in this case. Let's focus on Lori Vallow. Let's focus on her legal team, and specifically Mark Means, because Mark Means got into a public feud with the Woodcocks. Now, these are the grandparents of Joshua Vallow. Now, we're going to show you some series of messages and tweets that were made. We'll start with Mark Means. Look at this first tweet, which he actually has since deleted. And he accused the Woodcocks of sneaking in recording equipment into Chad Daybell's preliminary hearing. Well, he must have realized that wasn't the best way to go about it, so he deletes that tweet, and then he tweets this, seemingly to correct what he said. To clarify my previous tweet, he basically said that the grandparents were seen outside removing what appeared to be these recording equipment. So now let's turn to the response from Kay Woodcock, again, Joshua's grandmother. Now, this is a response via East Idaho reporter Nate Eaton, who's been following this case. And he says that Kay Woodcock tells me she and Larry were just wearing this equipment, these microphones, because they were doing, they took them off they got out of the truck. And she says that they never tried to wear them into the courthouse. Means is trying to make us look like bad guys. Maybe he'll make Tylee and JJ the bad guys in the courtroom to make it appear like Lori had a reason to murder them. Wow. Okay. So then Means has one more response about this idea that perhaps the Woodcocks were doing this, wearing this equipment for a documentary. And he says, a documentary? Is this a personally compensated documentary, a documentary with Network A&E? And you can see here that he's really trying to strike at what they are doing. And this is surprising. So, Judge, I turn it over to you. We have an attorney getting into a public feud with the grandparents of a deceased child. Is this the right way to behave? And is this a legal strategy that I just don't see at this point? What do you think's going on here?
Well, the first thing I think is going to happen is when this case gets to trial, I think that there's going to be requests and probably a granting of attorneys. You don't get to talk about this case, post on social media. Now that we're in trial with the jury, you don't get to do that, number one. Number two, that last tweet from him where he says, oh, are you being personally compensated? I think that's going to draw your credibility into question. The problem I have with that, to me, is it's a veiled threat that he's going to go after them on the stand, and because they're doing this, try to destroy their credibility, their authenticity. So I think it's a veiled threat. I think it crosses the line. It is an interesting strategy because I have not seen in many of these very public trials them actually go after witnesses via social media, and those are the grandparents, like you said, of dead children.
So, but what about the aspect where the Woodcock said, well, we're afraid that he's going to attack the children? Judge, I just want to follow up with you on that. The idea of, you victim blame here, and that's a tough thing to do in this kind of case.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's the emotion coming from grandparents because they are going to be emotional. It is their grandchildren. So I'm not as surprised to see something come from them like that, but I would be shocked if he responds in that manner about the children and putting them as the aggressors, not the victims.
Yeah, it'll be something to watch. Now, Lisa, I want to give you the final word on one final update we have here, about 30 seconds. So Chad Daybell's attorney wants to move the trial out of Fremont County, basically thinks can't get a fair trial. Your thoughts on that?
Any defense attorney is going to try to move and get a change of venue with hopes of that helping, with hopes of not having the exposure in that new and particular area. And just like this attorney, Mark Means attempted to throw a little, water onto the fire, so to speak, or gasoline onto the fire with the microphone. Yeah. Because they did that in a public setting. They weren't unwired.
Things are just getting more and more ugly, and we have a lot more in this case before these trials even begin. Now, we're going to take a break. When we come back, update for you in Tiger King and Leticia Stauch. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. Tiger King. It's a story that just keeps on giving. Now, more specifically, I want to focus on a story that everybody's fascinated with, the 1997 disappearance of Don Lewis. I mean, the sheriff's office says there's no new suspects in this case. This is, again, the former husband of Carole Baskin, the star, or one of the stars of the Netflix series. And if you watch that documentary, there were a lot of theories touted about what happened to Don Lewis, including those who believe that Carole Baskin killed him. There's even one theory that she put him through a meat grinder. Well, now we have a woman who has come forward. Her name is Trish Farr Payne, and she says she may have some answers because Payne was married to a man named Kenny Farr, who was a handyman that worked for Lewis and Baskin back in the day. And Payne says she claims that Farr came home one night driving Lewis's van. His guns were inside. He said, "Don is gone." Then there was a freezer that mysteriously appeared and disappeared at this time. She also says at one point in their very rocky and violent marriage, he even allegedly threatened her that he would put her through a meat grinder like he did Don. Now, 48 Hours had sat down with Payne. Here's a quick sampling of that.
And he said, well, don't ask me questions that you don't want the answers to. I thought he was telling the truth at that time. I thought, at least at that is probably the turning point where I knew deep down that Kenny has some part in Don's not ever coming back.
Now, both Kenny Farr and Carole Baskin have come out with statements. They said this is ludicrous. There's no idea why she would bring this up. Both said they cooperated with police, never had anything to do with this. Judge, I turn it to you. Do we believe Ms. Payne or not?
She sounds credible. If you just watch her during that interview, she sounds like there's no, I mean, we don't know if she's lying or not, but when she sounds credible and she says something like that, it's an admission on his part. I don't think you can completely discredit because of who said it and think it didn't happen. Could have happened that way.
Well, Lisa, here's my trouble with this. She claims she went to the sheriff's office, told them the whole story. Sheriff's office says, look, there's no persons of interest, there's no suspects. If you take that, they must have ruled her story out, right? I mean, now that she just appeared on 48 Hours, now the fact that this is coming out, what does law enforcement, what does the sheriff's office do in response?
So records are kept during that domestic violence incident where he was arrested 3 years after the disappearance of Don Lewis. When she did speak with the police officers and or investigators on the case, there's documentation of that. So it's simple to go back in 2000 and look at that. What was the statement that was made and how it was investigated and why he was ruled out? Was he ruled out at that time? Was it immediate? And if so, there are supplementary reports that will support that they interviewed him, that they, had gone through. He said he passed a polygraph test. When was that taken? Was it taken because of that supplemental report that she had alleged?
And Lisa, I'll just stick with you. What do you make of the responses from Baskin and Kenny Farr?
Well, they're expected. If obviously if they had anything to do with it, they'll continue to deny it. So we don't know. I've been a victim of domestic violence before I was a police officer, and I had a man who did threaten my life and threatened to kill me and people around me. And I was fearful and didn't speak about it until I became a police officer and felt safe. So like the judge says, I felt there was some credibility to her story.
Well, given all this controversy surrounding Baskin and all that's happening, you'd think she'd stay quiet? You think she'd just huddle up, not say anything? Not the case. She has a new career. And in case you haven't watched, it's a big one. Take a look.
And finally, the one we've been waiting for. Get ready to roar. I got the eye of the tiger. With her signature flower crown, she's dancing her way from Big Cat Rescue all the way to the ballroom, even bringing her cat. It's the Tiger Queen herself, Carole Baskin.
Get ready, you cool cats and kittens.
Welcome to 2020, everybody. Can't make this stuff up. Judge, your reaction. Will you watch? What do you think of this? Tell me.
Look, I think it is Dancing with the Stars' dream to have this and this opportunity, because look at the marketing. Just that little bit has everybody watching Dancing with the Stars. So it's brilliant on their part.
Yes, it is. Will I watch? Absolutely. Will I be rooting for her? I will not say, but we will be all watching and seeing what happens next in that case. Okay, now turning over, let's focus on a very serious story because there's an update in the Leticia Stauch case. Now, if you're not familiar with this is the stepmother out in Colorado who is accused of killing her 11-year-old stepson, Gannon Stauch. And she was ordered to undergo a mental health evaluation after she allegedly tried to plan a prison break. Now, the Colorado State Mental Health Institute concluded that she is competent to stand trial. Her attorneys are not happy about this. They actually convinced the court to have her undergo a second mental health evaluation, and this evaluation is going to be conducted by a Dr. Jackie Grimmett. So, Judge, let me stick with you here. Competent to stand trial. First, are you surprised that this was the result of the first evaluation? And what is that saying exactly here?
So first of all, am I surprised? No, I'm not, because these evaluations are measured at the time the evaluation is done, whether or not they're competent to stand trial. And often defendants who claim they're not, or attorneys say they're not competent, are found competent to stand trial. Now, a second evaluation, what that says to me, Jesse, is that she must have behaviors that are so extreme or so out there that these behaviors have convinced her attorney or attorneys she is really not competent. So the second evaluation, it's going to be interesting to see what it says. But again, it's competent to stand trial at this point in time that evaluation's done.
Judge, I just want to stick with you once again. As you know, a judge, if you're dealing with a situation where you have maybe two different opinions. So let's say this opinion comes forward and says that she's not competent to stand trial. What do we do then? You have these two conflicting reports.
What I hope for as a judge is that the prosecution and the defendant's teams meet and talk and determine if they can agree whether or not she's competent to stand trial based on the experts' evaluations. If that's not possible, then the court, it's the battle of the experts, Jesse, and the court has to determine based on the evidence presented, based on the credentials of the expert, based on the behaviors of the defendant, whether or not she's in fact competent to stand trial. It's a very hard decision a judge must make based on the evidence presented.
And let's not forget, the issue of competency is a separate issue from whether or not Leticia Stauch would ultimately put forward a mental health defense at trial. That's a different situation. Now, Lisa, let me turn to you. Lisa, we look at this crime scene. From your perspective, what do you make of it? We're looking at the woman who's in jail on these charges. We're looking at a bloody crime scene, a woman who's accused of lying to police. What's your take on this?
Evidence was found. Spatter was found on the walls, on the wall socket, saturated underneath the carpet. Was there enough evidence found to say that he was killed? Obviously, he was found later on, so we know that it wasn't a missing person case. For the first 3 months when she was under arrest, we know with certainty that he was killed. In that first period, though, and what was found at that original crime scene, is it possible that he was injured and taken away and killed later? So this will be interesting.
And the mental health component, does that play into your perspective on what happened there?
She had mental health issues in her background. If we were to look and see that she was being treated in any capacity in the past, psychiatric care, if she had been on psychiatric drugs in the past, if they're able to show that, then that is a strong possibility.
Right. Yeah, it's a disturbing case, to say the least, and we'll see what that second evaluation says and what the judge would ultimately do. Will this trial be delayed, or will it go forward? We'll wait and watch. Lisa, Judge, thank you so much for coming on. Everyone out there, thank you for joining us, and until next time, stay safe.